Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Fight for Our Freedom Radio. And I'm your host, Bad Baby, accompanied by my co-host, Alec Lejean. And I am sorry to say Alex is not going to be joining us tonight. If he does, I will be surprised. I'm going to ask everybody out there for prayer for Alex. As you know, I've said before, he is battling stomach cancer and he has not been able to eat for the last few weeks. He's rapidly losing weight and his spirits are pretty well down, everybody. So please keep Alex in your prayers and let's send him some positive healing energy and hopefully he can turn this thing around and get back out here and join us again. Also, I want to let you know that next week we will be having Dr. Richard Allen Miller join us, and he is going to enlighten us about the false flag operations that have been going on in our country, which we've had Dr. Richard Allen on before, and he is such a delight. Now, tonight, we are going to be covering the subject 5G. A lot of people don't know about 5G. They don't know what 5G does to us, but our special guest tonight is Kevin Modis. He is the president of the National Brain Association. So any further ado, let me get him unmuted. And Kevin, are you with us? And welcome to Fight for Our Freedom Radio.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure to be here. And just a minor correction, I'm the president of the U.S. Brain Tumor Association. There's quite a few different brain tumor associations, but we're different because we focus on prevention. You know, there's a lot of talk about treatment and sophisticated ways to treat cancer. I'm very, very, very sorry to hear about what's going on with Alex. But our whole goal is to prevent people from getting cancer in the first place, and we believe the focus should be on prevention because from economic point of view, you have dollars much more wisely spent when it goes to prevention, and when it comes to cancer, as much as our treatment has advanced, the reality is you don't want to get cancer in the first place, and many of the cancers we deal with, especially brain cancer, oftentimes, have very, very tough outcomes. So we're trying to keep people from getting sick in the first place.
Now, Kevin, share with us exactly how you started researching into 5G. A lot of people don't even know what 5G is, and they have no idea that this is being snuck in under the radar, so to speak, and exactly what it's going to do to us.
Yeah, really good questions, all of those. And let's start with the beginning. What is 5G and why is 5G a problem? Important to understand is that all wireless radiation is microwave radiation. And so when you put a phone to your head, you're literally microwaving your head. When you put it in your pocket, the phone transmits about every 30 seconds to the tower to check in, let the tower know it's ready to be transmitted to. So you're getting microwaves there, and so people, unfortunately, when they are microwaved, get sick, and they call that microwave sickness. And you can look it up, and if you look in Webster's dictionary, it talks about microwave sickness. The challenge with this issue is, unlike most illnesses, we have an industry that is really hell-bent on hiding and diverting people's attention from the sickness because it's pointing to their products making people sick. And people need to understand that all wireless devices use microwave to transmit, and all wireless devices can make you microwave sick. In terms of microwave sickness, people need to understand there's different categories. In short term, we're concerned about neurological effects. So people getting headaches from their phone after they use them, tingling down their face, nausea, dizziness. If you're getting vertigo or dizziness, you really have to look at and rule out wireless radiation health effects because it's very unusual, but we're seeing it commonly with people who are getting sick from it. Now, of course, long term, our concern is cancerous effects. and also immune system problems, and then we have reproductive harm. Now, what's very important to understand is that there was a very significant study that was just released, the final report, just this last week, and I want to bring your audience's attention to it. It was called the National Toxicology Program Study, Cell Phone Study, and it looked at animals, in this case rats, exposed to 2G and 3G wireless radiation. It was a $30 million study. It was commissioned 19 years ago. It was begun 16 years ago, and the study was done over 10 years. So it was a very significant research effort. It was the largest of its type. And the important thing is what it showed. It was supposed to answer the question definitively: can wireless radiation harm us? Can wireless radiation cause cancer or tumors? And can wireless radiation do this harm non-thermally below our safety guidelines? And it answered all those questions. This study showed significant heart cancer, brain cancer, and DNA damage non-thermally below our FCC safety guidelines for cell phones, which brings us to the safety guidelines themselves. The FCC oversees, and this is part of the problem, is the FCC oversees the safety guideline for wireless radiation. And those safety guidelines are set very high at on thermal effects. So in really basic ways, you're guaranteed not to be heated or burned by your phone, basically. But as you can imagine, there's all kinds of cellular effects before the cell actually heats or burns. And this is the big issue. Most of the biological effects that we're seeing are non-thermal effects over time. And our safety guideline is meant to look at acute exposures and thermal exposures and thermal effects only. So this study was very important because it wanted to see if prolonged exposures and the rats that were exposed and the mice that were exposed over 2 years. And so that was a prolonged exposure, and they wanted to see if the effects could occur non-thermally. And they were all kept non-thermal. They started and stopped the exposures to keep it non-thermal. So this was a very important study. Now, of course, and unfortunately, the industry tried to spin the significance of this, and that's very sad, I believe. And what's even sadder is the FDA got into the game, and the FDA said, you know what, this study, first of all, wasn't significant to humans because it was a rat study. Now, people need to understand how ridiculous this comment was, because the FDA uses rat studies themselves in order to look at the safety of the drugs they approve, and that rat studies are used in toxicology, and this was a toxicology study to look at the toxicity of this agent, that rat studies are used as the gold standard around the world for decades and decades to look at toxicity. So to say that this doesn't have any direct relationship to humans is absolutely absurd. And the question
Yeah.
has to be asked, why did the FDA, because the FDA commissioned this study originally, why did they commission this study if it has no relationship to humans? Were they worried about rats getting brain tumors from little cell phones on their head? I mean, it's
And Kevin, let
absurd.
me ask you, the study was on 2G and 3G, right?
It was on 2G and 3G, and it was CDMA, and it was also GSM. So Verizon uses more CDMA, and AT&T and T-Mobile. Okay, so Verizon and Sprint use more CDMA, and AT&T and T-Mobile use more GSM, and the world uses more GSM.
Right.
So,
So
but
we're not even talking 4G or 5G yet, right?
exactly, but exactly, but what the FDA said was, first of all, this didn't have to do with humans because it was a rat study, which is absurd. Then what they said was the exposure levels were 50 times the amount that people would get exposed to using their cell phone. And that's inaccurate No, 50 times the whole body exposure. And what they did was they used people's lack of understanding of the study to mislead people in terms of the significance of it. Now understand this, they looked at whole body exposures. So they said 50 times the whole body exposure for humans. Now, now this is a problem because this study was designed to look at local exposures. And if you look at the local exposure levels, the limits for the FCC, it was actually only 4 times higher than local exposures. And then the other thing they said was this is totally irrelevant in terms of the exposures that people get because it's much, much too high for whole body exposure. This was whole body exposure, so it had nothing to do with local exposures that people have from their cell phone. But understand this, the design of the study was to whole body expose the rats, so the levels of radiation in the brain were equivalent to what, or very close to, what would be experienced by someone using their cell phone. That's why they did this study. So the whole body exposure was designed to make the local exposure in the brain particularly similar or close to what humans would be exposed to. That's why they did it. And the other thing is they needed to have higher exposure levels to begin with because with a rat study, in order to extrapolate it to a large population, especially a large population of humans, you have to use higher exposure levels because they're only being exposed for 2 years, and we live a lot longer than 2 years. But this was the way
Exactly.
the study was designed. This is the way toxicology studies are designed. So to use the design of the study as ways to say that it's not significant or related to humans is absolutely ridiculous. Then why did they commission the study and spend $30 million on it? Why did they spend 16 years on this study, really 19 years from the beginning of the process, if it had nothing to do with humans? So the fact that the FDA has basically disagreed with the findings of the study, which is very unusual, and the fact that they're misleading the public in terms of its significance by manipulating the way and reframing the way the study was designed, but the study was designed very carefully to aim exactly at people using cell phones. So we're very disappointed and outraged, frankly, and especially because the FDA's mandate is to make sure people are safe from these wireless devices. But understand this. The first problem with this issue is the FCC oversees these safety standards. Now, the FCC is a captured agency, and I don't say this lightly, and people can go to the website I have information on, 5ginformation.net, 5ginformation.net, and when you go to this website, you'll see one of the resources I listed there is a report called Captured Agency that Harvard put out talking about how the FCC is a captured agency, captured by industry, and that it's really a revolving door from industry insiders, and they're basically looking out for the industry's interests, and they're very much not interested in looking at health, because this is really the big dark secret of the wireless industry, that the microwaves that this data travels on is carcinogenic, neurotoxic, and genotoxic. So the first problem is we have the FCC overseeing the human exposure standard. Well, it's a guideline. And it's completely inappropriate because they're an industry-captured agency. It's also inappropriate because they're not a health and safety agency. They don't have a health department. They don't have anyone with a biological background to be able to assess and really say whether this technology is safe, yet they tell you it's safe. Then, if you press them on it, they'll say, we're not a health and safety agency, even though they're telling everybody, hey, this is all safe, and all these organizations like schools that are putting wireless in the classrooms will point to the FCC guideline and say, well, we're 1,000 times less than the FCC guideline. Well, most people don't realize it's a thermal guideline. Of course it should be 1,000 times less. And when you press them on it, they'll say, well, we're not a health and safety agency. We get advisement from other agencies, particularly the FDA. Now, if you look at the FDA's website, they say very clearly that it is by law, they do not test the safety of wireless devices before they put them on market like they do drugs and medical devices. So the FDA, who's saying this is safe, really has nothing to base it on because they don't have the budget and they don't have the right to test these devices before they're put on the market. Now, most people assume these devices are safety tested before they go on market. What they have to do is fit under exposure guideline, and that a basic exposure guideline is a heating one. That's all they have to do is fit under a heating guideline. And for a guideline that high, you don't really need one, because if your phone heated you up or burned you, you would stop using it. So people need to understand that. Go ahead. You were asking me something?
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you, Kevin, are you familiar with the study that they did on school children where they let them talk on a cell phone for 20 minutes out on the recess field with their phone up against their head, and half of the students didn't have a phone? Then they brought them in and they did a test, and the children that were on the phone for 20 minutes had very, very low scores, could not concentrate. It really, really affected them. And also, I have seen online exactly what it does to the side of your head and your brain when you talk on your cell phone for 20 minutes. I've seen x-ray where it shows a normal brain, and then what it does to the brain if you're on the phone for 20 minutes and it's all red. It looks horrible. Are you familiar with these studies?
I understand what you're talking about, and yeah, if you microwave our head, and remember, the important thing is we are electromagnetic beings. So your head and your heart are at about 8 to 10 waves a second, okay? And your phone is at 900 megahertz, which is 900,000 electromagnetic waves per second penetrating your head. So you can see where there would be a problem when you pass these through the body and how they would affect the cells. And then understand Wi-Fi, like they put in the schools, is 2.4 gigahertz, and now it's 5 gigahertz. That's 2 billion or 5 billion electromagnetic waves per second passing through your children's bodies. So that's
Wow.
it. And what makes 5G so different, and it's a huge departure, and people don't realize what a significant change this is now we're going from maybe 1 to 3 to 5 billion waves a second up to 24 to 90 gigahertz, which is 24 to 90 billion waves a second. And when people, one of the things the FDA said, or critics of the NTP study said, well, these are the lower frequencies, and you can't extrapolate them to Wi-Fi or 5G. And that's simply not true. The reality is all of these wireless microwaves are very foreign to our bodies, and our body doesn't care if it's coming from a cell phone or a Wi-Fi router or what. It sees it as an injury, and the cells close up to protect themselves. When they close up to protect themselves, you get free radicals building up and banging on the DNA and damaging them over time. When the cells close up to protect themselves from these billions of waves per second, sometimes you have intercellular problems communicating, and you have neurological effects, as you can imagine. Also, when you have intercellular communication problems, you can see how you have immune system problems. And if you get DNA damage, which is what the NTP study proved is possible, then you can see how you have reproductive harm, because DNA makes up our reproductive material. So you can see how all this would progress. And with Wi-Fi, you're getting more waves per second and more problems. And then with 5G, you are moving into a very unnatural place. And we have an Army study on the website, 5ginformation.net, 5ginformation.net. You'll see an Army study that looks at 350 millimeter wave studies. And understand this, right now with your phone, you're using microwaves. With your Wi-Fi, you're using microwaves. Now with 5G, you're using millimeter waves, very narrow, dense waves, tiny millimeter waves. And it looks at 350 studies of millimeter waves. And what they say in that is that our body has no familiarity with this type of artificial, man-made millimeter wave, and that you can see, and they noted biological effects very quickly and very noticeably, because the body and cells simply don't know how to deal with this, and so it disturbs the cells quite a bit. So we are really allowing this industry, through their financial resources and influence in Congress, and understand this, The wireless industry spent $80 million lobbying Congress last year, and compare that to how much you spent lobbying Congress last year, and that we're allowing them to expose us to this very unnatural electromagnetic environment while we're allowing them to expose us. And in addition to that, while they're rolling this stuff out and exposing us, they're exempting it from health, safety, and environmental review. They call this streamlining. That means they want to put it out fast and things, so they're not going to look at anything like this. This is criminal because the evidence is clear, and with the NTP study, it is clear. This is a carcinogenic neurotoxic agent, and we should be minimizing it and trying to maximize the benefits rather than maximize it and seek these benefits we don't even think are going to be possible. So this is a very reckless course. Our legislators have to be held responsible. Understand 5G is coming from the federal level. It's coming from your Congress. It's coming from your senators. It's coming from the FCC, which is captured. It's being empowered by the FDA and their avoidance and ignorance of health problems, and it's being forced on the states and local governments. It is absolutely a federal overreach. It's the feds telling the state and local government what to do, and what people don't understand, for cell towers that we have now and wireless we have right now, if they put a cell tower near your house, they passed a law in 1996 called the Telecom Act, okay, the Telecommunications Act. And in Section 704 of the Telecommunications Act, it said that only the FCC can set and determine and maintain environmental standards when it came to this. Now, the industry sued to expand that to include health and safety. So if they put a cell tower, a current cell tower, near your house, and I've been to lots of these meetings, you'll go to the meeting, and the first thing they'll say is you can say whether you want this cell tower or not near your home, but you cannot talk about health and safety because we cannot consider it. It's been exempted by the 1996 Telecom Act. In the United States of America, they made it illegal to consider health and safety when putting cell towers near people, children, families, and the most vulnerable populations. That should outrage people. I was
Yes.
at one hearing, and a fellow was saying, talking about neurological effects. He said, I don't know about this. I don't know. And we started talking about it, and then they started the meeting, and they made the announcement, you can't talk about health and safety. And he turns to me and he said, why would they have to exempt talking about health and safety if there was no health and safety effects? And I said, exactly. And that was it. He's like, why do they have to, if there's no problem, why do they have to keep people from talking about it? The reality is there's more than 10,000 studies that point to biological harm from wireless radiation, and the safety organizations from the industry themselves are ignoring it. The FCC is ignoring it. It looks like the FDA is ignoring these studies, and they're ignoring the sick people. And we have microwave sick people. If you go to the
Exactly.
website 5ginformation.net, we have testimonies, and we have testimonies from every state in the nation. And these are young, healthy people. If it weren't for the microwave sickness, they're healthy when they're not around wireless transmitters. They get clear symptoms when they are around them. It's obvious. It's the wireless radiation. We are electromagnetic beings. These are electromagnetic waves, billions per second, and of course they're going to interfere and affect our bodies. Some people are getting symptomatic. We call them electrosensitive people. We should pay attention to them. They're like canaries in the coal mine, but it
Yeah,
is
you're
affecting
talking about
all our
me.
cells.
I have that problem. I have my router Wi-Fi turned off and my computer is hardwired to it. And I had them turn my smart meter off. I wouldn't opt out because I was getting the microwave sickness, and they tried to say I was mental because I was complaining about it. But yeah, I agree. It is like canaries in the coal mine. And just for those that don't know what microwave or electrical sensitive people experience, Kevin, tell us some of the symptoms that you'll be feeling from this.
Well, why don't you tell us some of your symptoms? Because I think it means a lot coming from the host.
Well, I was tired all the time, lethargic. I had a lot of pain in my joints, migraine headaches, nauseous. I know I was vomiting. And also, my dog acquired cancer and started growing tumors, and she was bleeding a lot from her vaginal area, which she was fixed. And it was I think it was the smart meter and the Wi-Fi that was causing all this. Now, I know when I turned all these things off, and it's interesting because I started researching this, I knew I was getting electrical sensitive. I knew that microwave was affecting me, and that's kind of how I came across you because I was watching some of your videos and your information, and the more that I found out about it, it was like a light bulb was going off. And the thing that disturbs me the most is when I was going through a lot of this and trying to find out about what's going on. And I knew the cell towers were dangerous. I had read an article that a lot of the children in the playgrounds near the schools, if they put towers up near the schools, these children were getting nosebleeds. And we have seen such a high rise in leukemia in the children, cancers in the children. And I think it's a combination between the Wi-Fi, the microwaves, and what they're putting in our food. And I agree that all these organizations that you have named are involved and they're covering this up. And they don't care. And the thing is, the average person out there does not realize that this is being done right under their noses. And the thing that really upsets me about it all is nobody asked me if I wanted Wi-Fi in my grandchildren's school. Nobody asked me if I wanted Wi-Fi in every restaurant I walked into. They just do this, and then when people start getting sick and they put two and two together, it's after the fact, and it breaks my heart. And that's why I do these shows. I have people like you on because we have to expose what's really going on and wake people up to what's happening and why people are getting sick and why you feel so badly. And I think when people put a cell phone, when I see someone put a cell phone against their head, I just cringe because I think that it's dumbing down America, it's frying your brain, and you're killing yourself, and you don't even know it because no one told you about this. Am I correct?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for sharing your own personal experience because I think that means a lot. Definitely understand you are certainly not alone. And if people go to the website 5ginformation.net and you look at government agency reports, you'll see the naval, and you can Google also Naval Medical Research 1972. What you'll see there is a study that looked at more than 6,000 studies of thermal and non-thermal effects from microwave radiation that was done by the Navy. And back then they didn't have the internet, so they had to by hand list all of them. And you'll see more than 100 pages, single-spaced studies listed. So when the industry says there's no evidence of microwave sickness, they are absolutely, absolutely lying. So at the beginning of the report, they outline 122 symptoms of what is microwave sickness. And they talk about just what you're talking about, neurological effects, cognitive, and the list goes on. So this is absolutely real. And who was getting exposed at that time? It was the Navy men being exposed by radar on the ships. They had two-way radios, which used microwaves, and they had UHF TV. So we had microwaves before our current technology, so we had microwave sickness beforehand. So going into the industry, going into this new industry, they knew absolutely about effects, and they've been kind of game planning and war planning the hiding of these health effects since the very beginning. And it's a sad chapter in our history, and it's a sad fact that yes, everyone's focused on the economics of it, the jobs, the money, the taxes, but people are leaving out the most important thing and the most valuable thing, which is our health. So let's talk about some of your symptoms you had. You said fatigue, and that makes sense, right? Because if your cells are constantly fighting to defend themselves over time, it tires out your body. So fatigue is a common symptom. Migraines, for sure. Your brain is electrical, and so especially for some people, these electromagnetic waves interfere or disturb the electrical system of the body, especially when you put a phone right against your head. And then nausea. What we're seeing is that for some people, their blood is very much affected by the microwaves. Your blood doesn't like being microwaved. Is that a big surprise? So with the blood being affected, you can get all kinds of very serious effects like nausea and vomiting, bleeding, and things like that. So um, the bottom line is we are electromagnetic beings. These are billions of electromagnetic waves per second passing through us. It's far from natural. Some people are getting, all of us are being affected. Some people are having symptoms. Some people, the only symptom they have is 10 years down the road, they're diagnosed with cancer. Some people have short-term effects like neurological effects. We should be listening to these people because they're trying to warn us that there's a problem right now. But the evidence is clear, the human evidence, and now what you're going to see, now you're seeing with the NTP, the animal evidence is now clear, and we have the mechanism. What I was describing before about how wireless radiation affects us is called a mechanism of oxidative stress, okay, oxidative stress. And if you look at the website I have up, you can look under evidence of harm, and under evidence of harm, you will see a study that explains the mechanism of how wireless damages our cells. And this wasn't one study that you could easily dismiss. It looked at 93 studies from around the world agreeing and coming to a consensus that this is a mechanism of how wireless radiation causes damage, not directly through energy and pulling an electron of the cell, but indirectly through the cells being injured and the response to the injury over time. So very much people should look at the mechanism. It explains it. They write it in a way so that people can understand this. The information's out there. There's a couple other websites I want to point people to. Bioinitiative.org. It looks at 3,600 studies and separates the studies by systems of the bodies that are being affected. And importantly, another website is saferemr.com. saferemr.com, and these websites are on my website as well, 5ginformation.net. Safer EMR is important because it's out of UC Berkeley School of Public Health, and there a scientist named Joel Moskowitz has been following the research, and he's been vetting the research very carefully and talking about it to show that the evidence is absolutely there and trying to warn people. So we have a tremendous problem here, and we have industry really colluding with government. And understand this, there is an auction next Wednesday, November 14th, that must be stopped. It's for new 5G frequencies. Why must it be stopped? Well, because the non-thermal effects, the cancerous effects, the DNA damage, the things that were seen in the NTP study are not being tested for before these frequencies are auctioned off. So the frequencies aren't safety tested, the devices aren't safety tested, and they just test them on you. So we
Who's
are the
running the
human
auction,
experiment.
Kevin?
Hmm?
Who's running this auction?
The FCC is running their auction, and their primary responsibility is to auction off frequencies. So this is their primary responsibility. They kind of they do these power grabs, and the reason I like to talk about your symptoms is you're the evidence, because if you're not doing the studies you need to, and they really have squeezed off the funding for studies, because you can't be funding studies talking about the neurological and cancerous effects from wireless and also be
Right.
pushing wireless into schools and every other environment. And understand this, I was a school social worker before I was doing this, and I understand the issues. And I'm still being contacted by teachers who are getting very sick and developing cancer near these families, and children who are getting, like you said, nosebleeds, nausea, dizziness near these routers in schools. And we are absolutely harming our children in a very significant way. And I want to go back to one of the questions you had about cognitive changes. Yes, there are studies that clearly show cognitive changes from even short-term exposure to wireless radiation, and we're talking about difficulties in thinking and processing and remembering. The issues with memory are very clear, and the fact that we're putting this in our schools to promote academic performance, and we know this wireless radiation is associated with cognitive problems, is unbelievable that we're putting it in there. And I know I worked with LA Unified. I clearly laid out the research and told them, but you know what? When the industry comes in, they make sure everyone gets paid. Okay? The LA Unified spent $1.25 billion putting wireless in their school system, and in the process, the school district got money for other IT projects. Everyone gets benefits from it, and so it just gets rolled in, and everyone looks the other way in terms of health effects. They say, oh, well, this is 1,000 times less than the FCC guideline, ignoring that it's a thermal standard, and they just push along, and they basically use our children as guinea pigs in this huge human experiment of wireless radiation health effects. So people very much need to stand up, and people are getting effects. So we estimate that about 30% of people are getting some type of microwave sickness effect, but they're not associating them. And one of those is poor memory. People are not remembering as much. Poor sleep, because it disturbs the natural rhythms of the body. And we have studies going back decades that show that if you expose people to wireless radiation, you reduce melatonin. And when you reduce melatonin, that affects sleep. But melatonin is also a very powerful antioxidant. And sleep is a very important time for the body to rest and recover. And it interrupts that time of resting and recovering. So these studies go back a long time. These go back, many, many years. So there's no question there's effects, but all these non-thermal effects are ignored. So people need to understand what's happening. We need to push back. The problem with 5G is this is a worst case scenario. You're talking about high frequency, high intensity, wireless transmitters, and because the waves are shorter and denser, they don't travel like the old waves. The old waves are about 3 or 4 feet long. They traveled, several miles. These don't travel as well, so they have to have a cell antenna about every 500 feet or every 2 to 10 homes is what the industry is saying. 800,000 cell antennas, cell tower antennas. 800,000. Understand this. Right now we have only 300,000, which is already too much. And now you're talking about 800,000 of high-frequency ones in addition to the low-frequency ones. They're not going to stop the low-frequency ones. They're not getting rid of 4G. They're just going to add on top of it 5G. So if you didn't get sick from the lower frequencies, you may get sick from the higher frequencies or the combination. One of the things the FDA didn't point out was that these studies look at just one source of wireless, and there's nobody who's only exposed to one source of wireless right now. Some people are exposed to multiple sources, different frequencies, and continuously and very close to the body. So they didn't take that into account, but the FDA left that out. They also didn't mention that these lower frequencies are not going to go away. You're going to have low frequencies and high frequencies. And if you're using Verizon, and your phone 4G doesn't work, guess what? It reverts to 3G. So you're using a phone that's using 3G that was tested in this study and shown conclusively to cause cancer. It was classified as clear evidence of carcinogenicity. That's the highest level they can give it. Okay?
And
And people
Kevin,
need
what
to understand that.
I want to point out something about the phones real quick here that a lot of people don't realize. And what you're talking about was that the phone pings, what did you say? It was every 30 seconds to the tower?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an exact number. It's different for every device, but the idea is when you're not using the phone, it's pinging.
It's pinging. And so
It's
what we're
emitting
talking
wireless radiation as it
right.
transmits to the tower. Yeah.
Right. What we're talking about is when it's a ping, it emits a burst of microwave every time it transmits to the tower. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is they're selling clothes that have pockets to keep your phone. You know, like a baggy pants with a little pocket in the front that your phone slips into, or bras that have a slit in them that your phone slips into. So when you're putting that phone in that bra or in your pocket, your front pocket, you're emitting microwave through your breast, you're emitting microwave into your genital region, and this is going to cause serious, serious cancer problems, and possibly, you know, for the children, I would say uh, not being able to reproduce. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, fertility is down, and what's interesting is in terms of reproductive effects, the evidence of reproductive effects are really quite clear. So they do studies, and they're not complicated studies to do. You put a wireless laptop on someone's lap. You measure someone's sperm and their count and stuff. Then you put a wireless laptop on their lap for half an hour. Then you measure their sperm again, and they show sperm mutation and death. So all these kids, they're using wireless laptops and wireless tablets, and they're putting them on their laps and things like that. You know, we are affecting their ability to reproduce and their reproductive organs. And these are microwaves, and we are allowing these devices to microwave radiate our children and their reproductive parts. And of course, the ovaries are sensitive to being microwaved as well. And understand this, there's a study from MD Anderson that showed an almost 100% increase in anal cancer, okay, for children 17 to 25 years old. So it was increasing, but it was going down in the upper ages. And they said, the author said, this is exactly opposite of what it should be. And I wrote the authors, I said, that's because the kids are putting these phones in their back pocket and they're pinging to the tower, you know, every 30 seconds or so, and they're getting microwaves into that area, into their anal area. The problem is, you know, when you get anal cancer, it's highly, highly deadly, highly, highly lethal. So, you know, this is very, very serious. And people also need to understand that brain tumors are now the number one cancer for children 15 to 19, and these are our heavy users. And you also need to understand that the World Health Organization has already classified all wireless radiation as a possible carcinogen. The International Agency for Cancer Research, which is a portion of the World Health Organization, classified wireless radiation as a Class 2B possible carcinogen in 2011. But in doing so, they also said that there's a positive association between cell phone use and brain tumors. And no one's heard about that, and our country has done nothing with that information. Why? Because most of the studies they were looking at were about cell phones to the head. Now, they generalized it to all wireless and saying possible carcinogen. But the other thing they said in their report is that children, we estimate, get twice as much radiation to their head, to their brain, as adults. Why? Because their head, their skull is thinner, so the microwaves penetrate more, and the phone is actually closer to their brain. So when you get closer to the brain, you get more radiation effects. So the funny thing is the FDA, what they didn't say was, well, they're complaining about the amounts of radiation that were exposed in this NTP study. What they didn't say is that for children, the exposures are already double what would be adults would be. They don't talk about that either. So what the FDA did in minimizing the significance of the NTP study is truly criminal, and they should be held accountable. And people need to understand how they're lying to the public, how they're lying to the public, and the serious consequences of what they're doing. And they've been doing it for 20 years. And enough is enough, because with 5G, we will be maximizing people's exposure to high intensity wireless, along with the low intensity, putting it close to the home. It has to be close to the home in order to transmit. The transmitters are going to be lower so that they can have direct sight. They need to have direct sight. So that's going to make them closer. And they're going to be every 500 feet, creating a blanket of microwave radiation across our communities. This plan is absolutely insane. Insane. And if the industry didn't contribute so much resources, this plan wouldn't move forward. But it is. And it's unbelievably unhealthy. This is a public health crisis. Do we have a safe alternative? Yes. Yes, we have a safe alternative, okay? If you want internet services to the home, use fiber optic to the home. They're going to run fiber, and understand this. In the old days, you had to dig to put fiber down, and the industry will say, it's too expensive, it's too expensive. But what they're going to do is hang fiber along the phone lines as it is to get to these transmitters in front of people's homes. So we're saying just take that fiber and keep running it all the way into the home. Then you don't have a transmitter in front of the home. You have speeds up to 10,000 times faster than wireless because you don't have to transmit from one transmitter to another. It's a direct connection. Okay. You don't have the cybersecurity issues because these wireless systems can be hacked and people can steal the information. We know that from what happened with Russia. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we're making our country entirely cyber insecure. And then the issue of privacy. The idea of 5G is this. It is not about your cell phone. It is not about your cell phone. I mean, that is the biggest lie of the industry, but they're not really lying. I mean, because they're saying what 5G is really about. 5G is not about your cell phone. We already have 95% connectivity for your cell phone. What it's about is about taking data from your home, and the vision is your home's going to have 500 transmitters per home, and these transmitters are going to be sending information to that transmitter in front of your home. They're going to capture that information, and they're going to sell it to the highest bidder. This is why they want to do 5G, to massively and intensely violate your privacy and sell that information just like Facebook does, because that is enormously more profitable than the wireless services themselves. So why are they going to spend $300 billion rolling out 5G, the industry that is? Because the information and data they are going to be stealing from your home and selling it will be almost invaluable. So if we run fiber all the way to the home, the router is now inside your home, and you control the data.
Now, a lot of people don't understand. They're talking about, well, you'll say that to someone and they'll say, well, I don't do anything wrong, so let them go ahead and spy on me or get data from me. But what we're talking about here, people, are the new smart technology. They're coming out with technology. Here's a perfect example of you can send a message to your refrigerator, and it will take a picture and message it back to you what you have in your refrigerator. Now, the information they're going to be gathering on us is, oh, well, look at Joe Schmo. He's got a couple beers in there, and he's got unhealthy food in there. So let's just gather this information and we'll send it out to his health provider, and we'll raise his health insurance because he's not living in a healthy manner. Am I correct, Kevin?
Well, that's the thing. They can use the data for whatever they want, and there won't be any real limit to it, and everybody's going to want that data. But it's a massive violation of your privacy, and they will know exactly what you're doing and when you're doing it, because that's the potential of the system. You know, I was at a art fair, and there's a woman who was selling art asked me about what I do, and I was explaining it, and she said, it's funny you said that. I have this iHome, so it's this wireless system in the home now where she gives it things to do. And she says, I'm on the phone and I'm talking with my mother about very, very, very specific esoteric things. And I was doing it near my iHome. She said it was so interesting because about 2 hours later, I got an email regarding this very, very, very specific thing they were talking about advertising to her. And I said, absolutely, it's listening to you, and the reason they want AI is to crunch all that data and make it useful in terms of marketing to you. But they can also use it for other purposes. And law enforcement is already like just mouth-watering over this and fighting over, what data they're going to be able to use to convict people of all kinds of crimes in their own home. In their own home.
Yep.
And unlike phone services, this does not have the same protection as phone service. So I really think people are being put asleep in terms of them selling the convenience of it. Meanwhile, they are accessing tremendous amounts of information. And for people to put these wireless systems, these Amazon Echo and these other things into their home, you are absolutely crazy, because they are listening to everything you're saying and doing.
Yeah.
And for these smart TVs, they're scanning. For many of these TVs, they're scanning what's going on in the home in front of them and taking that information and using it for all kinds of purposes. So this is our future, and with 5G, it'll be this exponentially worse. But understand this: if you have 500 transmitters inside your home, you are going to be living inside of a soup of microwave radiation. And we know that even the Interphone study was done in Europe that looked at heavy users of cell phones. By the way, this is another way they distort the danger of wireless radiation health effects. They defined a heavy user as someone who uses their phone 30 minutes a day. That's a heavy user. And for a 30-minute a day heavy user, they said after 10 years, you double your risk of a brain tumor. Okay? What
Wow.
about people who are real heavy users, like 3 to 6 hours a day?
Yeah.
The association there is extremely clear. But no one's looking at the real heavy users, and that's another way they avoid looking at health effects. So with 5G, we're talking about a worst case scenario, a blanketing of microwave radiation, low and high frequency, and what you see in the Army report, they said the subjects, 30, 30 to 80% of the subjects were aware of the microwave radiation. Why? Because for when it comes to millimeter waves, they're not going to be as deeply absorbed in the body, but in the skin, they're going to be more greatly absorbed. And we have research out of University of Georgia where a researcher was calculating it, how much? 30 times as much in the areas of the skin that will be absorbing the millimeter waves. 30 times as much radio frequency radiation as with as more than 4G. And what else is going to be absorbing a lot of the radiation? Your eyes. So your eyes and your skin. And the industry is saying, well, it's just going to be absorbed by your skin, so it's fine. Well, let's understand this. Your skin is the largest organ of your body. It's
Mhm.
designed to protect your body. And your nerves invenerate all of your skin. So when you affect your skin, you affect your whole nervous system. It's not like your skin is separate from your body. But that's the implication of the industry. This is absurd. Uh, this is absurd, but this is the argument of the industry. So,
And
so we're
basically,
talking
Kevin,
about very serious
we're
skin and
talking
eye
about
effects.
money here, aren't we? Because they're been off anybody that is allowing this to go through, and it's all about money. So, for the average person that's out here listening right now, what do you think we can do to try to get this stopped?
Okay, very good question. I think what you need to do is you must contact your congressman, your congressman in your area, and all the other ones in your state. Okay, and all the other ones. Period. But start off with yours and the ones in your state. You must contact your senators. Okay, and it's not enough to call them. Go into your local offices and ask for a meeting. Demand a meeting. Okay, contribute. Listen, money talks. This is a pay-to-play system. If you can contribute, pay, help contribute to campaigns and ask for time with the representative themselves. That's what works. That's how we got to this problem, and hopefully that's the way we can get out of this problem. Um, and anything else, and we need people who can contribute their skills. If you have legal experience, understand this. The lawyers have written the laws to deny you your rights to look at health and safety. The lawyers have. If you have legal experience or legal skills, we need your help, okay? And if you want to email me, you can email me at 5gisharmful@gmail.com. 5gisharmful@gmail.com, and it's on the website as well, 5ginformation.net. If you're good clerically, we need your help, absolutely. If you're good organizing, Yes, we need you. If you don't mind advocating, we need your help too. We need to push back against, because this is an unfair fight. This is a David and Goliath situation, but the fight is a worthy one, because what is more important than protecting your health and preventing you and your family from developing cancer unnecessarily? I can't think of a worse way to die. Neurological effects that will torment people and force people to lose their jobs, reproductive harm that's going to affect our systems. And understand this: in some of the animal studies where the animals are microwaved, after 3 generations they have sterility. So you're talking about sterilizing our population, and some of the scientists are saying this isn't the kind of thing you're just going to come back from. Oops, we sterilized our population. This is insane what they're doing. And
Right.
understand this also: 5G is planned to be emitted from satellite too. So they're talking about satellite that'll cover every inch of the planet, so that
Wow.
I guess people can access internet on every inch of the planet. But you're talking about exposing every inch of the planet to these high frequency waves. This is this is this is crazy, and it's a worldwide rollout. This is a worldwide problem, and it's due to worldwide corruption and the money behind it.
That's
People,
insane. It's totally insane. Another thing I was thinking about, Kevin, is maybe the parents should like go to your site, gather the information of what it's doing to the children in the schools, and start getting into those PTA meetings and raising a ruckus here. Let them know that this Wi-Fi in the school is affecting their children.
I have to tell you, I was contacted today by a professor at a college in New York who teaches computer classes and Cisco networking. That's the routers that do the wireless. And he says, I want your information because I want to fight this rollout of 5G, especially on our campus, because he understands the technology. And anyone who understands the technology knows this can't be healthy. And it's
Yeah.
not.
And I think that the medical field doesn't have a clue because I have seen several people be committed because they went to the doctors and complained about electrical sensitivity.
Yeah, I mean, it's really sad that the industry has successfully miseducated doctors. But you know how to educate doctors. You buy them lunch and you schmooze them, and they have the resources to kind of do that kind of thing. But just look in Webster's dictionary under microwave sickness. It's right there. Take that to your doctor. If you contact us, 5G is harmful at gmail.com. Other countries have developed medical guidelines for assessing and diagnosing electrosensitivity. And you know you're electrosensitive if you move away from the transmitter and your symptoms get better. But one of the things that's important, and one of the ways that the industry worked around studies looking at microwave sickness, is it takes about 15 minutes for your body to feel kind of bad, and then it might take 15 minutes or more for your body to feel better. We're not machines. We don't instantly respond. So the studies the industry was working around the problem with, they would expect instant results. They expose people. Where's your symptoms? That doesn't work that way. It takes a while. So understand that with yourself too. You might not feel bad after using the phone for like 10, 15 minutes as your body starts to feel worse, and then you might not feel better after using the phone for like 10 or 15 minutes. So we're not instant kind of systems. But in terms of talking about what we can do, the other thing is, if you can contribute funds, then you should look at getting a lobbyist and someone who can access the system from the inside in order to get to the representatives that are foolishly pushing out these initiatives and funding them. So if you can afford a lobbyist helps you access the system, and they've been doing it for years and years. They know everyone. They know how to work the system. They know how to get inside the system. They know how to represent your interests. In this case, listen, I'm not an environmentalist, but I care about my personal environment, and I think you should too, right? And I'm not an activist, but you know what? This is outrageous what they're doing, and they're getting away with it, and it just doesn't make sense. And the fact that they're ignoring and hiding the science and keeping people from understanding the truth while your friends and family are getting more and more cancer, more and more neurological effects. Don't be surprised if people are having these sudden heart attacks. Your heart is an electrical system. Some people are affected by this stuff over time, and what's interesting about the NTP study is it showed effects in the heart, lots of effects in the heart of the rats. So these sudden heart attacks that you're seeing with people, probably not a mistake, could be connected to this. And all this increase in cancer. I mean, it's ridiculous when I'm watching TV and I'll see a commercial for raising money to fight cancer, and then I'll see a wireless commercial, and people don't understand that they're associated with each other. This is absurd, and as you said, it's time to wake up, and anything you can do to stop this is not too much. This, I believe, is like a silent, high-tech holocaust happening right under our noses, literally with phones, right under our noses, and most people don't realize it. And as you said, we need to wake up and we need to act quickly, because with 5G, unfortunately, they're using this military-grade technology, we believe, to systematically harm people, and we believe intentionally, because they understand these health effects. Why do I say that? Because in the courts right now are $1.9 billion worth of lawsuits about people getting brain tumors from their cell phones. And why do I say this is military-grade wireless? Because the military is already using millimeter waves that will be used by 5G for crowd control weapons. And people can Google active denial system, active denial system. I might have the videos on my website. You can look at them, 5ginformation.net. But that's why I say it's military grade, and they're using it. And the interesting about the active denial system is they focus these millimeter waves on people. Their skins feel like they're heating up and they run away. But this isn't
Right.
being exposing people for an instant. We're talking about exposing people for years and years, and the power levels not being strong enough to heat, but that the exposure is continuous. So there's much more exposure, and it's very close up. So this weapon is used, a football field away. People in San Francisco, where they're putting them on people's light poles, sometimes it's 10 feet away from people's windows. So this this is really unbelievable what's happening,
Well, I have
but it is
friends that,
happening, and it's everything
right.
people can do, and especially put your money where your mouth is. Pay for a lobbyist, get in there. Join with others, pay for a lobbyist, get in there. If you want to join with us in doing this effort, please let us know. This really is about financial might over right. This is financial might over what's right, which is protecting health. This is about money. If people have resources or can raise money, that's what it takes. We need the lawyers to push back against their lawyers. We need the lobbyists to push back against their lobbyists. It's time to put up a fight. It's time to push back. This is your children and your own health at stake. There's nothing that could be more important in my mind.
Well, the active denial system that you mentioned, I actually have friends that went to the protest that on the pipeline, the oil pipeline, where the Indians were protesting them running across the land. And they were using that system on them, where they were microwaving them with the truck, and they were, like you said, far away. And the people that I knew that went there to cover the story were tremendously sick, and it took them days and after they left there from to recover from that, because they left because they couldn't take it. And that's just that, when they would turn it on, like you said. But what we're talking about is a 24/7 radiating of your brain and a blanket of this around our planet, which is going to cause mass illness, mass cancers, people that I believe this actually affects your brain to where you are agitated and you're going to see more violence. It's just altogether, it's an attack on humanity, And we need to wake up, people, and we need to do something to make this stop. I it isn't going to just take one person. It isn't going to just take me. It isn't going to just take Kevin. It's going to take all of us. Am I right, Kevin?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is I had a reporter call me. He didn't do a story, which is was another story about why we're not getting the media coverage we deserve. But he had questions, and he said, there's all these people, and they have these grand theories about why this is happening. And I said, and there's conspiracy theorists. I said, well, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I work with more than 200 doctors and scientists from 35 countries. This is the evidence. It shows people get sick from being microwaved. This is microwave sickness. It's simple as that. And he says, yeah, but there's these people and they have all these theories. And I said, well, listen, people can't understand why you would do this to your own people, or why you would allow it to be done by your own people. So they're coming up with all kinds of theories, because this is a crazy plan. This is a truly harmful plan. So that's why I think people are kind of trying to figure it out. Now, I think it's just blind short-term greed and denial that is leading it. But it's interesting from a psychological point of view. The real denial that's involved. We had a meeting on the phone with a doctor who is the head of a child oncology group, and it was a half-hour meeting, and he spent the most of the meeting explaining why he didn't want to talk about this and why he couldn't do anything to help us. And as we talked about that, we talked about the need to deal with this and the severity of the problem and the evidence that's quite clear, and the NTP study that provided clear, conclusive proof. He didn't want to hear it, because then he'd have to do something about it. So it's like this denial. And then for people who are getting sick, there's almost this cognitive dissonance. They want to use the wireless, and so they just don't want to think about it. And when they're getting sick, they don't want to think they microwave themselves. So it's a very strange issue to deal with, because of this cognitive dissonance in terms of dealing with it. And then as a group, like this group denial, which the industry feeds with their advertising and all their group stuff to kind of foster this disbelief of what's happening. But it is happening. People are getting sick just like you, and it's going to get much worse with 5G. It has to, because what we know is that the NTP study proved that heating and power was not the issue. That's not what we need to protect against. That it was these non-thermal effects. So what is it? Well, it's more about pulsation and modulation. That is, how much do the waves pulse? And you can imagine your cells there. How much it pulses means how much does it get beaten up would be a factor. And that's what we believe a factor is. The next one is modulation. How much information is put on these waves as they're passing through you. And you can imagine if they have a lot of information on them, the waves are coming through kind of dirty. They disturb the cells as they try to protect themselves. And with 5G, we're going to have more pulsation, because these are going to be higher frequency, and higher modulation. That is, there's going to be much more information on the waves, because that's the whole point of it. And so they're going to come through the cells much dirtier. So because the pulsation and modulation will be more severe, we believe 5G will be much more harmful. And what was interesting about what you said about the people who are affected by this active denial system is they were very sick for days. And if this just affected your skin, you wouldn't think you would be very sick for days. But you have these radiating effects. This affects your whole system. Your skin is not separate from the rest of your body. And by the way, the electric part of the wave, is absorbed into the skin, but the magnetic part of the wave goes much deeper. So we expect to see severe effects on the organs, and I worry for those people long term who were exposed to the active denial system. What's going to happen to them long term? I'll be very curious about that. Um, so, so what should we do? And I like that question. We very much need to reach out to our representatives and hold them accountable. A lot of people want to go to their local representatives. This is a federal problem. This is your federal congressman. But your federal congressmen have offices in your area. You can go in and speak with them. Your senators, there's 2 senators for every state. You should contact both senators. They have offices locally, and you can go in and speak with them and demand meetings, and again, give money freely if you want, and so that you can try to get a meeting with the representative themselves. And of course, you can make comments to the FCC, but unfortunately it's a very captured agency, and I don't know what will happen to those comments because you have industry people looking at your comments. And take matters into your own hands. If you believe lawsuits appropriate, we believe it is too. So so people should need to take action. They can't just sit on this. This is not to leave to someone else to do. There's a very organized effort on the other side to hide health effects. People got to work together as a group, in mass, and you can contact me to be connected to other groups. As I said before, we collaborate with more than 200 doctors and scientists. They've signed a formal appeal asking for a moratorium on 5G, until the proper safety standards and measures are put in place to protect people. And people can find this at 5gappeal.eu, 5gappeal.eu, and that's where the formal appeal is listed. Now, there's a new appeal that's come out that is focused on the space 5G as well, because they're going to emit this from space as well as by land, and the signatures, the first appeal had more than 200 scientists and doctors. This appeal had a broader focus, and now they have 156 pages of signatures from organizations, from prominent citizens, from medical and scientific experts, and from all over the world. So the people are starting to come together, and if you Google 5G appeal Earth, 5G appeal Earth, you should be able to find that new appeal that has an even broader focus. Yeah, so it's 5gspaceappeal.org, 5gspaceappeal.org, and they look at and do a great job of explaining the dangers of 5G, which is nice to have an educational component. And then they also allow for the signatures, and again, 156 pages as of now. So you have these kind of tools to take to people and saying, you know what, this is a bad idea, and the benefits of this really do not outweigh the costs, and no one is taking into consideration the health costs.
Well, I'm curious, Kevin. You said that you were telling this doctor everything that was going on, and he said he gave you several reasons why he couldn't help you out. Could you share with us some of those reasons?
I'd love to share his name because it really made me frustrated in dealing with him, but I won't do that. He said he didn't have the expertise, and I explained to him, you know what? Very few people are paid to look at wireless radiation health effects. Cutting off the funding has been one of the things they've done. And matter of fact, UCLA did a study looking at pregnant women, and it was a repeat of a study that was already done in Europe, showing that pregnant women that use more cell phones, had children with more behavioral and developmental problems. And after she did the study, she wanted to do follow-up studies, of course. She simply couldn't find the funding, and I asked her about that. What's interesting was at UCLA, and I'm from Los Angeles, and I'm alumni of UCLA. What's interesting, across campus, the university was receiving tremendous amounts of money to help develop wireless technology and smart cars and smart vehicles and smart gadgets and things. So this is what the industry does. It says, you know what? We don't really want you doing that type of research. Let us give you money to do this type of research instead. And this is one of the ways they've kept institutions away from doing this kind of work. And it's really sad, but that's the situation. We have representatives that are being paid through campaign contributions. We have systems and institutions that we normally look and protect people's health. Understand this, the American Cancer Society should not be trusted. The American Cancer Society should not be trusted. When the NTP study was first released, the chief medical officer, Dr. Brawley, said this represented a paradigm shift in terms of how we look at non-ionizing radiation and cancer, and he was right. But over time, that message changed to the point of by the time the final reports were done, oh, well, there might have been cancer, but it was only a little bit. Um, but that's also, people have to understand that the American Cancer Society has many, many, many corporate partners, and AT&T is one of those corporate partners. They also have a global advisory committee of CEOs that's made up of only 10 CEOs, and understand Motorola is one of those, and so is IBM and other companies with wireless investments. So when the American Cancer Society says there's not really a problem with this, I think they're really just speaking for the industries that now really fund them, and that's very, very sad. But we're seeing that in terms of organizations that are used to standing up for people with cancer and public health, and that they've been compromised, and also groups that normally would stand up and fight for groups without a voice. The industry goes in with their funding and co-ops them and spins this as the best thing since sliced bread, and so they're taken out of the game. It's amazing the environmentalists have been really, have gone for this hook, line, and sinker. What they've sold the environmentalists on is the idea that, well, wireless is the solution to all our problems because we're going to use it to help manage consumption. We're going to carefully watch everything and manage everything so we consume less and save the planet. What they don't tell the environmentalists is that the technology itself is one of the worst environmental and health hazards of our time, and that we will be exposing people tremendously to it. And while we might be saving the planet, we're certainly not going to be helping the human race. But this doesn't just affect humans. Any living thing is affected by wireless radiation. That's animals, obviously, with the animal studies, plants and insects, bacteria, especially for millimeter waves. Millimeter waves are shown to change the way bacteria survive, and so we're talking about making drugs less potent because they'll be changing it. So this is a very powerful technology, and we're using it recklessly, focused on one thing. Does this stuff carry data? Well, three things. Does this carry data? Can it penetrate well and travel long distances? But we have to take into account how it affects our biology. We're not machines. We're electromagnetic beings, and this is not being used separately from us. It's being used very much close to us, and with 5G in much closer proximity, and these waves will be passing through our bodies. They will be entering our bodies. So yes, we should look at it, but the only thing we look at and the only thing we protect against is heating. And that is obviously not good enough. But that's what the industry is holding on to. Understand this, the FCC does not have safety standards, and that's what we need is safety standards, and those are developed through a rigorous process of evaluation. We have safety guidelines, which are basically just a suggestion, and that suggestion, and you can see this on the website of the FCC, is based on three groups, and those three groups are very much influenced and dominated by the wireless industry itself. And so the groups that are suggesting that our safety guideline is adequate, that we should hold on to this outdated idea that the only effects are thermal effects, are groups that are invested in the industry and the military that use this stuff very much. So we need a safety standard. We need safety testing before wireless devices are put on market. We need safety testing of the frequencies that are being auctioned this Wednesday, November 14th. We need a stop to that, absolutely. And then the next thing is people should be outraged because the Telecom Act in 1996 was designed to basically say only the FCC can look at health and safety, even though they're not a health and safety agency. And now we have to expand that to cover small cells, because again, these small cells are not for telecommunications. They are for the Internet of Things, and that means communicating from thing to thing. Okay, and for that they need to expand the Telecom Act to include this 5G system and to exclude looking at environmental effects, which have been expanded to include health and safety. So there's a bill. The bill's been submitted by Senator Thune, and if you want to know who the bad guys are the FCC and the FDA and Senator Thune particularly. He's the chairman of the Commerce Committee in the Senate, and he's single-handedly led the way in terms of forcing this wireless into our communities and onto our communities, and he needs to be held responsible, absolutely.
Well,
So,
and let's talk about some of the wireless technology that people use every day in their um, going to work, and one is law enforcement because they have those mics on their shoulder all day, and they radio back and forth to 911 or whatever. And I would say that would be microwaving their shoulder and the side of their brain, wouldn't you?
yeah, absolutely. Worry about it. And what's interesting is people are developing health effects near their transmitters, and no one's making really the connection. But there is a connection. But let me go back to Senator Thune because this is important for people to understand. The Senate Bill 3157 has been introduced in the Senate. This bill is called the Streamlined Small Cell Deployment Act. This bill must be stopped. This bill must be stopped. It does three things. First, what it does is it shortens the amount of time that local governments are allowed to consider small cell or these 5G transmitters. It shortens it so much that most likely most local governments won't have the resources or time to meet the deadline. And if they don't meet the deadline for considering it, it's automatically approved. So that's forcing it. The
So
second thing
what
is,
do we do? Do we call our local legislation and tell them we want this bill stopped?
no, federal congressman. And one senator in the Senate can put a hold on a bill and stop it. One senator can put a hold on a bill and stop it from moving forward. And this is Bill 3157, the Streamlined Small Cell Deployment Act bill. Okay? People need to understand. So first, it shortens it so that these are automatically approved. The second thing is it has a streamlining aspect to it. That means no consideration of health effects, safety effects, environmental effects, or aesthetics. Or aesthetics. Doesn't matter how ugly. Hey, if you don't have a pole in front of your house, they'll put a pole in front of your house and they'll put a transmitter on it, and they don't care how ugly it is in front of your house. And they don't care if it lowers your property values. And they don't care if your kids get sick out there playing and no one wants to move into your house and you can't sell your house. They don't care, and there's no provision for taking that into consideration. The third thing S3157 does is, it of course it expands looking at environmental effects only the FCC for these small cells. And then the fourth thing it does, which is very wicked, if you get injured or you get sick from this for what they do or don't do related to these small cell transmitters, you can't go to court and get remedy. You have to go back to the FCC, who's the one who did it in the first place. Legally, you will not be able to go get to court if you're getting sick from environmental, factors, which is considered health and safety from these transmitters. You can't go to court to get remedy because people will get sick. You have to go back to the FCC and complain to them, and they're the ones who did it. This is absolutely outrageous. This is unacceptable. Senator Thune is responsible. He needs to be held responsible for doing this. And your senators need to hold him responsible and stop this bill. And one senator can stop a bill. They can put a hold on it, and that will stop the bill from even being considered. This is
Wow.
what we need. We need your senator to stand up and do what's right. Your
Now, from
senator
what
to
I
lead the
understand,
way,
Kevin,
start representing people's interests.
they have already rolled 5G out in Europe, haven't they?
Not so much Europe. Europe is a problem because Europe has lower standards often in some countries than ours because they take into account these non-thermal effects. And people need to understand Russia has a safety exposure guideline that is 500 times lower than ours. 500 times lower than ours because they recognize non-thermal effects. Austria has an exposure standard, the guideline, that is 10,000 times lower than ours because they recognize non-thermal effects. And what they're saying in Europe is because of the heavy radiation that's going to be emitted by these 5G systems, that these countries with lower standards are going to have to either change their standard and raise them up, or 5G is not going to be able to go in their country. So yes, Europe has done better because they recognize a precautionary principle. That is, if you're not absolutely sure if something's harmful, you try to minimize your exposure to it rather than, just let it go or maximize your exposure that they do here. In the United States, we don't respect the precautionary principle. We wait till people are injured, and then after they're injured, then we start looking at it. It's absolutely backward. We are backward. So that's what's happening in some parts of Europe. And some parts of Europe, England is looking at rolling it out like the U.S. because they're as capitalist-oriented, it seems, as we are. And the race is all about racing China and South Korea. But let's get something straight about China. We are following the lead of a communist country that has already installed, or they're looking to install 40,000 cameras to watch their people, and they've already begun something called the social credit score system. And what this does is it watches you, and depending on your behavior, they either give you, rewards, or they give you, they do things to harm you. Like, for instance, your child would not be able to go to private school. You would not be able to use certain types of transit, things like that. And they're already using this social credit score system to control people's behavior. Well, I believe they're racing to 5G because 5G will be the ultimate tool in terms of watching their population and controlling and repressing them. Is this really what we want for the United States of America? To seriously and deeply violate our privacy, to watch and monitor our people and try to control their behavior using technology? Is that really what we want? Especially since we already have a system of wireless that provides 95% connectivity for our devices. We already have everything we need in order for us to communicate with each other. Now we're going to have our devices communicate and watch us and monitor us. Is this really the vision you want? Do you want a self-driving car that they can stop centrally, that can stop you? Because that's the idea, is that you're driving along and you're not smart enough to figure out you need to stop. The car is going to stop for you. Okay? Do you really want your car to be controlled centrally? Because that's the plan. And by the way, if you have self-driving cars, you're going to have a transmitter on your car. Why? Because if you don't have a transmitter, the other cars won't see you, and then they can run into you. So they're going to force a transmitter on top of your car. And by the way, with these self-driving cars, we've already had a death due to a self-driving car, and we've had many accidents that are being done. By the way, in Congress, they're selling self-driving cars as this is going to make us safer. That 40,000 lives have been lost a year due to human error. If you really think that human error is going to be worse than millimeter wave technology, you have got to be kidding me. This is a technology that is interrupted by temperature changes. This is interrupted by land formations, that is very directional and has so much limitation to it, we haven't used it for 30 years. Not really commercially, extensively. You're talking self-driving cars, it doesn't make sense. It will be much more error-prone than any type of human error. And I remember at one of the testimonies I saw, I did see someone testify and said, what are the error rates in these? Can we expect with these systems? He said 100%. He goes, 100% error rate. We're going to go for a system that has 100% error rate? He goes, it's just like your computer. Sometimes it downloads slowly. Sometimes it uploads slowly. These are computers.
Yeah.
Okay? So this is what they're using to push the whole system. We need to have transmitters everywhere because of self-driving cars.
Well,
people have to
really
stop and think, because these choices are being made for us. and they're being made to us.
Right,
And
right.
understand this also: the self-driving cars they're trying to pass bills that will exempt them from our common safety standards for cars. Now they're supposed to be protecting ourselves, supposed to be protecting us because they're more safe, and yet they're going to exempt them from the common safety measures for regular cars because they know these cars will not be safe and they will be killing people and there will be tremendous amounts of lawsuits, so they have to protect them. They're going to make it so you can't sue if you're killed by one of these self-driving cars. And the conversation has gotten so ridiculous that after these hearings, they're saying, well, a certain amount of people are going to have to die for these cars to learn how to, drive and do better. This is the kind of ridiculous conversation that's happening around here, and the only reason this ridiculous conversation is happening is because of the tremendous resources flowing through our Congress and really blinding them to what is really good for the public. That's why people need to use their resources and push back, hire lobbyists, use attorneys to push back in a very methodical, systematic way, because what is happening in America, it's not about D.C., it's not about D.C. being broken, it's about D.C. being corrupted by the money that's flowing through it. So if you want to play, this is a pay-to-play system. Pay the money, get into the system, begin playing the game, and then you have a shot. Then you have a shot. Join with others. You're welcome to join with us, 5ginformation.net or 5gisharmful@gmail.com, or do it on your own or with other organizations. But this technology is not about you. It's about them, and it's time that we start standing up and take back D.C., take back our government, make it start working the way it's supposed to. This is a participative system, the democratic system. You must participate. You participate with your voice. You participate with your money. You participate with your time. Okay? We must participate. The industry is participating in every way possible, and the system represents them. If we want it to represent us, we must participate, and we must participate the way it works. It's pay to play. So pay and get involved, okay? Organize and get involved. People who are organized and control votes. What matters in D.C.? Votes. So organize and control and threaten with votes and push people out of office. If you're not going to represent us, we will work hard to make sure you do not get reelected. They listen to people like that. Those people get meetings. They get what they want. They say, we need money in order to get reelected. You provide money, they listen to you, they give you time. We go like that. Lobbyists are a good idea. They know the people in the system. They know how to move effectively and efficiently. Do not be afraid to use lobbyists. It's a good idea. But this is where we're at, and this is why things are at the point they're at, and this is what we need to do about it.
But what people don't understand about the self-driving cars, they think, well, it's just going to be a few cars, but they have already impacted the employment, because they're putting these cars as delivering pizzas. So there goes somebody's job there. They're also designing these cars in semis, so that semi truck drivers will be losing their jobs. And they've got a self-driving bus right now that's operating in Detroit, and that eliminates the bus driver's job. So, where people are going to go for work when they roll this out all the way around, and all them jobs are eliminated.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of people being asleep, the unions, who are very powerful in the Democratic Party, are asleep on this, because this is about super automation. And when you automate, you eliminate jobs. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. So if
Well,
these unions really want to represent their workers, they should oppose this system because of the health effects, and the workers are going to get more sick around these systems, but also because their jobs are definitely going to be displaced. That's the idea.
Well,
Automation.
okay, now I have my computer hardwired and my Wi-Fi turned off. I have had so many of my friends on Facebook tell me, "Oh, I didn't sleep last night and I feel sick and I'm not feeling well." And I ask them, "Do you have your wireless on?" And I tell them, "Please turn it off." And you can go into your router and it can be turned off. You can hardwire your computer and they come back with, "Well, I turn it off at night before I go to sleep." What do you think about that?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, first of all, let me comment a little bit more about the failure of the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party is supposed to be for health, supposed to be for children. But unfortunately, wireless is one of their top funders, and so they very much are the. And you remember President Obama pushing cell phones for homeless people, and he
yeah,
allocated, I think, 15 or 25 billion dollars of stimulus money to expand broadband across the country. And broadband can be wired and fiber optic, which is the solution. Now, understand this: the solution is fiber optic all the way to the home. Until you have fiber optic, use our current landlines and empower them with DSL. This is the cheapest way to get very good internet to all the homes right away. Empower them with DSL on the landlines we have until we can run fiber optic along the phone lines into each home. That's the safe solution. And as you're talking about, in terms of safe homes, inside the home, wired into the home, then wired computers and mouses, wired to the phones, and then using wireless just when you leave. Um, but your question was about them getting sick, and then about yeah. Well, it's important to understand if you turn off your wireless at home at night, it's a good idea. But you don't just turn it off; unplug it, because some of these systems, even when they're turned off, they're still transmitting. And understand this: in the cable companies, they're now putting two routers inside of the cable router. So one of them you can actually turn off. The other one you can't turn off. That's for evidently people walking by this on the street. They are going to get using your home cable box as a hotspot. So inside your home, which is a horrible idea. But you can get another type of router. You can get your own router that is all wired, and wiring your routers and wiring your computers is definitely the way to go. But what you're saying is, if for these people who are just unplugging and turning off their wireless, their Wi-Fi at night, that's better than having it on continuously. But yeah, if you're affected during the day, it may still affect your body at night. We are human systems. What happened during the day, yes, can affect us at night. So we encourage people to wire everything. It doesn't take very long. It's much healthier. It's quicker. It's more secure. It's faster, for sure. And it's not a big deal to put a drop in the rooms that you use your computer. The reality is most of us don't walk all over our house using our computer. Given the health risks, it's not really worth the trade-off. You probably like 2 or 3 places you might use the computer. You put a drop in those places. You just plug in, and you're ready to go. And again, it's much faster. So
yeah.
why not use the wired connections that we've had for a long time? Because we've had them for a long time. And why risk the health effects if you don't have to? And what's the other thing is, oftentimes in a home, because people are affected unevenly by this, and I believe women are more affected than men, and this is my own theory. People aren't looking at how different ethnicities are being affected, but I think there may be differences there, and they're not looking at different genders. Um, but I think there may be a difference. Why? I think like if you think of a microwave oven, you stick a steak in the microwave oven, it really sizzles because it's water and fat molecules being agitated by the microwaves. But if you stick rice in that microwave oven, it doesn't really heat very much. I think women are a little more like steak than men. They have more water and fat molecules being agitated, and of course, pregnant women are probably the most absorbent and affected by these microwaves, and pregnant women should take, extreme precaution in terms of using wireless, because you can imagine their stomach is all water and fat, and those microwaves are hitting their stomach and certainly affecting the developing baby. If you look on the website, if you Google Dr. D. Conley, Kunli, and then a space and then Li. He's a senior scientist at Kaiser that looks at the effects of electromagnetic waves on pregnant women. He's showing increasing miscarriages, increasing childhood asthma and obesity after birth. So yeah, there will be effect on women, particularly pregnant women. So what happens in a household is you might have a man using wireless, not having really any symptoms at all, feeling pretty good, and you have the women and kids getting very sick and having symptoms. But the women and kids think it's just their imagination because dad is fine, but dad is maybe a little different, and maybe one member of the family is very sensitive and not another member. So understand this. It's just like people who are allergic to pollen. Is everyone allergic to pollen? No, but some people are. Does it mean that the people who are allergic to pollen, it's not real because other people don't get allergic to pollen? That's ridiculous. Our systems are all different. We're all sensitive to different things. But some people are definitely electrosensitive. I know people who can walk in a room and tell you where the wireless transmitters are, even though they can't see them. They can tell you what kind of transmitter feeling in their bodies. So, and I know many people like this, and many more people will become electrosensitive with 5G and are becoming more sensitive with more close-up use of wireless and more multiple exposures already.
Now, Kevin, when people say I don't put my cell phone up against my head, I just keep it on speakerphone. What is that doing to us?
Well, let's talk about a lot of things you're raising. Okay, so in terms of recommendations, I would definitely, if you're going to use a cell phone, different phones have different levels of radiation emissions, and you can Google SAR or specific absorption rate for your phone, and it's not a perfect measure, but it is somewhat of a measure, and you can look at which phones emit more radiation. Sadly, most of the American phones are very, very high toward the top of the limit, and remember the limit is a heating limit. And so you can pick a phone that emits less radiation. That's the first thing, SAR. The second thing is use a wired headset. Do not put the phone up to your head. Use a wired headset instead. And I like wired headsets more than speaker. You can use a speaker as long as you're far enough away from it. The problem is when people use speaker when they're walking around, they hold it usually in front of their chest, especially women. And again, the chest is very absorbent of all these microwaves. So most people, for a speaker to work well, they have to hold it pretty close. So using a speaker far away would be ideal. And if you're going to use a phone, use a wired headset. And then I like to put the phone down like a couple feet away with a headset. I think that's a good idea. And then a wired keyboard and mouse, wired computer to a wired router to a wired connection to the wall. This is definitely your safe solution. A couple things. Do not put the wireless phone, under your pillow. We have kids who have been reported to get brain tumors from the phones under their pillows, and parents obviously being very upset about it. Don't have the phone next to your bed on because it pings like every 20 to 30 seconds and you're trying to sleep, and that's affecting all kinds of systems in your body. But you can put the phone on airplane mode and you can still use the clock. But I've heard that airplane mode is no longer really turning your phone off. It's just actually keeping it from emitting from a very high level that would interfere with a plane's devices. So now airplane mode, my understanding, is not really airplane mode. So you have to turn your phone powered off and just go buy a little alarm clock. So that's important because people are affected there. And obviously minimize the number of wireless devices and technologies and number of frequencies, therefore, in your home. So adding the wireless alarm system, bad idea. Adding the wireless thing that goes around and vacuums your house, bad idea. Adding the wireless echo system in your house, bad idea. Adding wireless speakers to your stereo, bad idea. But wired systems, all a good idea, all faster and more secure. So you have to run the wires along the corner of the room. Big deal. It's better than getting sick. It's better than making other people sick. And why take the risk? Even if you're not sick now, you certainly don't want to be sick in the future. And understand this. The sicknesses people, once you're electrosensitive, that is neurologically sensitive, once you've pushed your body to the tipping point, you don't come back. You oftentimes get more and more sensitive to more and more things. It doesn't
Yep.
get better, and it's a lifetime thing. And the other thing to understand is the other diseases you get from microwave radiation exposure are not ones you usually come back from. You know, these cancers are deadly. It's a big problem. The
Why
immune
don't you
system
come back?
problems are
Is it
horrible, and
because
the
it
reproductive
destroys
harm is permanent.
is it because it destroys the cells and they can't reproduce? Because that's one thing that I have noticed. After I got sick and I had to put my dog down from cancer and growing tumors and bleeding, I mean, I'm not as sick, but I have not completely gotten well.
Yeah, well, the thing you would want to look at is making sure that your environment is super clean, because some of the people to recover have to literally go up into the woods and live in very low EMF environments to allow their body to heal. That even just like a light exposure kind of triggers all the problems from the past. So so that's the problem. But what I'm trying to paint a picture for people is you do not want to just do it, and then when you get sick, you say, "Oops, now I'll try to correct it." It doesn't work that way. Most of these illnesses are very, very severe, and with the electrosensitivity, once you get electrosensitive, you don't really get better, and you have to take extreme measures to feel better, and that's what people have done. So. Um, so we're encouraging people to minimize exposure and push for policies that
Right.
keep that exposure to a minimum. Distance is your friend, so if you do have a wireless transmitter, keep it far away. People are like, "Well, it's in the other room, so I'm okay." Listen, if your devices can pick up those microwaves, so can you. Okay?
Yeah.
If your
Exactly.
devices can pick up those microwaves, so can you. So that's not far enough away. Is it better than being right next to you? Yes. Okay. Is it good enough not to harm you? No. Is can one is one cigarette better than smoking 10 cigarettes? Yes. Can one cigarette kill you? Yes. So, this is what we're dealing with, how much exposure. And people aren't being informed about the risks, so they can't make informed decisions. People aren't given informed consent, and they're basically exposing people and doing a huge, massive human experiment in wireless radiation exposure without people's informed consent. It's against the Nuremberg Code. What we're doing is against the Nuremberg Code. It's inhumane what we're doing. And yet we're proceeding because we've been dazzled by the promises and the convenience it offers. But health must be taken into account. Health must be the factor. Understand this. When the devices are developed, there's no one with a biological background helping develop these devices, whether they're routers or wireless devices. Is being left out. These safety standard setting groups, they're leaving out the biological people and the biological input, and they're just using technicians and engineers. Understand this, the FCC is full of lawyers, technicians, and engineers, but not biological people. Not biological people. It's looking at how it's affecting our body. We're just leaving it out. And then in terms of the media, I wanted to talk about that. I have a reporter at the New York Times that desperately wants to do a story regarding the biological effects from wireless radiation. But her editor won't allow her to run the story. The editor won't allow her to run the story. Even though she's talked to the experts, she understands the evidence. And once you understand the evidence, you can't not want to do something. Can't not want to do something. But she's not being allowed. Why? Why? I believe because some of the top advertisers for newspapers and all media is wireless now, and they're
Yeah.
not willing to risk the revenues. They're not
Yeah.
willing to risk the revenues.
I agree.
This is all about money. And you know what? Our legislators are selling us off cheap. They're selling off our health cheap, and it's disgusting. And the media that's supposed to represent, information and give out there is selling us off cheap. Is selling us off cheap. Most of these newspapers don't even have investigative units anymore. And the reporters will say, I just don't have time to research this well enough to do a story on it. I'm like, you don't have to do a research a story well enough. This is not about you. Interview the experts. Let them talk about it. Okay? But we don't have the time. We don't have the investigative resources anymore. We're just going to do the short, quick, and easy stuff. And then don't get me talking about who owns the media. Are the media companies now owned by the companies with invested interests in wireless? They're sewing up the game here, but the end game is that people are going to continue to get very chronically sick, cancer being one of them, but all these strange immune system problems, the reproductive harm, and fertility is down in industrialized countries more than a third already, and neurological effects short term, and some of these short term effects happen very quickly, and with millimeter waves, we think it'll be even quicker than with the older technology. And so we're basically going to be short-circuiting and microwave poisoning our population. This must be stopped. This must be stopped. So really, there's no limit to what people should do. Okay? This is basically a high-tech, silent war being waged on our own people by one industry being allowed to do whatever they want with us.
And
And this must stop.
we're
This is our
radiating our
war.
babies
This is
when
our
we put a
generation's
baby
war.
monitor in the bedroom, don't we?
This is our generation's war. This is where the
Well,
stand must be stood.
my
This is where
question
the
is,
stand must be
when we
taken.
put a
Yeah.
baby, a wireless, when we put a
Okay. So
wireless
5G.
baby monitor in
Yeah.
the baby's
Baby
bedroom,
monitor is not a good idea because with all wireless devices, the issue is the same, but babies are very protective. Hey, use a wired one, wired with a wire instead. Okay. Or get up and check on your baby, like the old days. Get up and check on your baby.
well,
So,
we become so lazy. That's what it is, and everybody
but
thinks, oh, this is wireless. What a good idea.
well, you know what? I mean, if you have a drop for a wired connection, you can put a laptop in that baby's room, a wired laptop with the wireless turned off. And remember, you got to turn the wireless off in your laptop because it transmits right in front of you. And for women, it's right into their chest. So put a wired laptop in there and run the baby monitor app through the wired laptop. It'll be bigger, it'll be better, it'll work better, and it'll be safer for your child. This is
Wow.
not hard. Getting wired connections is not hard to install in the home. You just need to focus on it. And it's much faster.
Okay, Kevin. Well, we're coming up on the last few minutes. You want to give out your information of how to contact you and your website and where people can go to find out this information to try to advocate to help you out.
Yeah, so the website is 5ginformation.net, 5ginformation.net. The president of U.S. Brain Tumor Association. You can contact us at 5gisharmful@gmail.com, 5gisharmful@gmail.com. Some websites with studies on them, bioinitiative.org, saferemr.com out of UC Berkeley School of Public Health, saferemr.com. And then if you look on my website, there are a couple websites that are focused particularly on 5G, and you should look at those websites. And particularly there's a website of groups that are fighting 5G in the community. You should definitely look at those. Let me just give you those real quick. Scientistsforwiredtechnology.com and mystreetmychoice.com. My Street, My Choice, and Scientists for Wired Tech. They're working very specifically with communities to stop 5G in their community, so I encourage you to look there. What is 5G.info? What is 5G.info looks at a lot of the other issues with 5G. That is, wireless uses a lot more energy, and that wired systems are more focused and pointed, and they use less energy, and the other problems with wireless. And ehtrust.org really looks at all types of issues with wireless radiation, and is maintained by their executive director, Theodora, and Deborah Davis is the founder of Environmental Health Trust, and She's a PhD scientist and has long held that wireless radiation, particularly cell phone radiation, is harmful. And I put also on there c4st.org, and this is interesting, c4st.org. This is a Canadian group founded by the former president of Microsoft Canada, who's really taken a stand and tried to educate the government and the people of Canada regarding wireless radiation health effects. That's in Canada, so I think that speaks volumes that a former president of Microsoft Canada says we have a problem with this technology and we need to do something about that. I think that speaks volumes. So that's some of the information. 5G is harmful at gmail.com. Don't keep this secret. Tell your friends, tell others. Let's do something about this. It's time we take our country back. It's time we take our government back. It's time that health become the most important factor again in the decision making of what government does. And we definitely need to consider the biological impact of all this wireless technology as we move forward and favor wired systems, fiber optic, and landline use to the home instead of wireless, because that's the safe solution, that's the smart solution. And let's wire our homes and make them truly smart homes, because all these smart products are actually not smart products. That's just more of their marketing genius hiding the fact that this stuff is absolutely harming us long term, and we need to move toward a healthier, better environment.
Well said, Kevin. And we want to thank you for all your research and your efforts. And for those out there that want to get involved, contact Kevin, contact your senators. Let's try to get something done. Contact the schools and let them know what it's doing to the children. And get involved, people, because like I said earlier, this isn't going to happen with just two people. It's going to take all of us. And I want to thank you, Kevin, for coming out tonight and sharing your information with us. Some excellent information. I learned a lot tonight that I didn't know, and you just keep up the good work, and we're behind you 100% here on Fight for Our Freedom Radio.
Yeah, and S3157, Senator Thune's bill, S3157. Please, we must move against this. This is the worst bill possible in terms of wireless radiation health effects and the proliferation of 5G, 800,000 new transmitters every 2 to 10 homes.
Jesus. Well, I won't have any place to hide anymore, will I, Kevin?
Doesn't look good for people who are electrosensitive, that's for sure.
I imagine so not, especially if they start using satellites to put it around the world. And you know, when you said it affects the animals and the insects, it's funny because I had just read an article where 2/3 of our insects have died off, and it's affecting the birds. The birds are dying off because they don't have the insects to eat. So, you know, actually we're talking possible mass extinction here.
I mean, it's not smart what they're doing, and when I go to the FCC meetings and they talk about the wireless ecology, it makes me furious because they are damaging our natural ecology with their wireless ecology. So all these fancy words and marketing ways of hiding the truth. The truth is wireless radiation is harmful. It needs to be minimized. We need to use wired connections as alternatives. We are not anti-technology. We are for safe technology, and all these technologies must be developed with very much humans in mind and the biological impact in mind. 5Ginformation.net.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Kevin, and you keep in touch, and I'll see if I can get some more help out there for you. I'll send you via email.
All right, well, God bless you, and God bless everyone in your audience.
Thank you very much. And on that note, everybody, I am going to sign out for tonight. I hope we educated you thoroughly. Join us next week. We will have Dr. Richard Allen Miller on. And always remember, Bad Baby loves you.